guys, welcome back. So on this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be your host. My name is Alice. We're talking about sex education and safety, and I'm here with Sarah Grace and Liza as my friends on this episode. If they would like to introduce themselves after I do, that'd be awesome. So I am a senior women's leadership major. And I'm really interested in talking about how sex education can really empower women to take control of their health and also take better care of themselves.
Hey everybody, my name is Sarah Grace and I'm a senior psychology and women's leadership double major. And yeah, I'm super excited to learn about all the research in which you've done and learn some new things today.
Hey y'all, I'm Liza. I am a senior performing arts major and women's leadership minor. And thanks for having me, Alice. I'm excited to talk with y'all today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys. So I thought at the beginning I would just go over some of the downfalls in the state of sex education in the US right now. Kind of ask for some experience that you two have had in the public school system or just in your personal life, and how we can better equip the women listening to our podcast to kind of go beyond the limitations and not let themselves be taken advantage of by a system that does not prioritize women's sex education. So I'll just start by throwing out some fun facts, or rather not so fun facts. So the sex education in the US is really lacking because the focus is in high school only. It doesn't start any earlier. And we really think that sex education should be an open topic for girls and boys and all kids, maybe even as young as sixth grade. But before that, sex education should come in the form of equipping people to have body autonomy so that they don't fall susceptible to abuse, especially sexual abuse that they might not understand is happening to them. There are only 29 states that are requiring that abstinence be stressed, but 19 more states only emphasize sexual activity within the context of marriage. So that's a heavy majority that are stressing abstinence only sex or sex only within the context of marriage, which is leaving out a lot of individuals from the equation. There are 17 states and DC that require an inclusive view of sexual orientation, and that's it. So only 17 states are even talking about sex within queer communities and for queer people, which is just really, really lacking. There really has to be some work done in that. 6 states require only negative information to be provided on homosexuality, and positive emphasis on heterosexuality, which is just really straight up discriminatory. So that's just about, I guess, the way in which the sex education system is discriminating individuals that are not heterosexual and married when they're having sex, which is basically no one. I think 1 to 3% of the population waits until marriage to have sex, and it's just completely irrational to teach sex education in that way. Furthermore, the benefits of sex education are mostly tied to trying to decrease the teen pregnancy rate in the US, because in, I believe it was 2005, there were a total of 11,610 pregnancies reported among women aged 15 through 19. And that was really the reason that the public school system wanted to up the sex education in schools. It was really just a focus on teen pregnancy. It was not about protecting young people from HIV and STIs. It wasn't about informing them about their, it was really just about getting that number down to stop embarrassment to the parents of those kids. It wasn't about the kids' health, which is absolutely what sex education should be about. So I just wanted to hear from you guys. Did you, when you were in high school, receive any education about sexual health as far as STIs, sexually transmitted diseases went? And what did that look like? I'm really just curious.
Wow, that you just through a lot of just like crazy realities that are actually out there, especially with like the just the lack of education for queer communities too. But I would say for like my education, abstinence. That was really all I was taught. That was all that was talked about. My teacher at the time, it was my PE teacher who was doing the sexual education class in high school. And I even asked her, I was like, why do you only teach abstinence? And she's, it's required that she can only teach that and, can't teach anything else. And it's just like crazy because they didn't talk about STIs. They didn't talk about STDs, and, none of these like really prevalent, issues that are, sorry, someone just walked in. They really didn't talk about all of these, prevalent diseases and infections, nor what they are and how they can affect the body. And I don't think that I actually learned about them until coming to college. And, I'm going to be completely transparent, when I say this. And just because, I feel like at this point, people are told to, oh, don't say anything. But, I'm just going to be completely transparent with everyone. And, I really didn't learn about STDs or STIs until I was sitting in the gynecologist learning that, I had an abnormal pap smear due to HPV. And, due to my failure of having that vaccine, my body fought it off, and I had a normal pap smear the following year. And, which was like very, very good. And then I also got my vaccine, which is, I very much encourage that. But yeah, so I feel like that honestly might be a very similar story to a lot of other women that, you don't really learn about it until you're sitting there and you have one and you have to learn about it.
Yeah, my experience was more positive than most, and I'm very thankful for that. I actually was taught in middle school, so I had teaching, I believe, seventh and eighth grade year. We did a week out of every of each year, where we did a week of reproductive health education, and then in high school, I did maybe a 1 week on it in freshman year, but I had nothing after that, which so my high school was actually more of a letdown than my middle school. My middle school was interesting as well because I think that there was the teacher who taught it. I really respect her for doing this, but she taught other forms of birth control other than abstinence, even though it is an abstinence only curriculum. So I really respect her for doing that. However, when it came to we were allowed to ask anonymous questions via like strips of paper and stuff. And when it came to somebody asking about LGBTQ plus relationships and sex and those kind of relationships, that she had to say that she was forbidden from talking about that. So it was definitely lacking for that. And yeah, it was, you know, not extremely comprehensive, but we were taught about the different forms of STDs and different forms of birth control. So it was a good base, but I think it definitely needed to be built upon um, more and more. And again, it didn't because I didn't have the same experience in high school where we would do it every year or really just talk about it at all. So yeah, it was a very interesting, kind of weird, but yeah, I did have it in middle school, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, Liza, that's really interesting. I have only researched this issue of the educators not being able to speak to queer sexual relationships, I've not heard from anyone personally that that they heard that question asked and that it was denied. That is really enlightening to hear from you, because words on a paper are just that. It's just a research paper that you're reading. But the fact that you had students that were in your class that were interested in that and wanted to um, be advocates for their own health, and they were denied the information, it's just the direct discrimination that I was speaking to. And that's just devastating. That's why this is such a big issue, especially because you don't want to be the person getting an abnormal pap smear and learning that you might have a disease like what you were speaking about, Sarah Grace. That's one of the fortunate positions to be in, right? I mean, I'm also very fortunate to have a gynecologist and be able to take care of my reproductive health. But what about people that are afraid to go to the gynecologist because of an expensive medical bill? And then the state also is afraid of pushing for free women's health care, because it's seen as a women's issue when it's really just a human issue. And then if you're a queer youth, what do? Where do you go? I really just wanted to open the forum to talk about this stuff because I think it's important, especially for the younger people listening to this podcast, to be aware that these changes are political in nature, unfortunately, and that you really should be mindful of how important a sexual education is to the youth and how you should include that in something you're looking for in candidates you might be voting for. Try to vote for someone who's going to advocate for your health and your protection. The number one cause of especially women having cervical cancer is just a lack of screening. Cervical cancer is 100% treatable within the first 6 years for most individuals, unless they have other compromises to their immune systems or something else happening. But 6 years is such a long time. And there are still just deaths from cervical cancer in the United States. And that is sad because we are a technologically advanced country. There's no reason this should be happening. And it is because of the stigma associated with sexual health. And it's not about a teen pregnancy. It's about women's lives that are in danger, like we're talking about. So thank you guys for sharing your experiences. What you both described was actually having a sexual education in high school. But in South Carolina, actually, any parents must be informed in advance of the sexually specific instruction. So if it's a comprehensive education that a school system's trying to push and a parent doesn't like that, or doesn't want their child to be informed about that, they can just opt out. The child is sent to a different room and will probably receive a book about abstinence, read it by themselves, and that's it. And if they choose not to read it, they can do that too. That was my experience, actually. My parents opted me out of sex ed in high school, and I was given that book in a school district in northern South Carolina. And that was my entire sex education until I got to high school. So that's still happening. And there's been no push to change it that I know of in South Carolina.